This is Dr. Daniel Fernandez, who is a professor at California State University, Monterey Bay, right here in the area. He has taught physics for 20 years. He teaches courses on infrastructure, system thinking, and sustainability in the environmental studies program at CSUMB. He has also served as chair of CSU's Academic Senate and chair of Division of Science and Environmental Policy. Daniel received his Bachelor's of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from Purdue University and both his master's and PhD degrees from Stanford University in Electrical Engineering from 1988 to 1993. At CSUMB, he coordinates Sustainable City Year program, where his classes work on sustainability-related projects with city partners. Good community outreach. Daniel is deeply involved in sustainability projects on campus, in his community, and statewide. For these efforts, he was awarded the President's Medal for Service to the university in 2012. He has been involved also in fog water collection. Remember that drought we used to have? His research has been over the past 12 years. As part of his practical research, he has deployed passive fog collectors over 24 sites in California, testing different materials used for collecting water from fog, in addition to conducting measurements on the amount of water extracted from the fog collectors. He also examines chemicals within the fog water, including mercury and mercury compounds. Currently on sabbatical, was lucky to pick him up here. Daniel has traveled this past month through northern Chile, studying various fog collection installations in South America, including past, present, and future applications. Today, Daniel will address what individuals can do in support of a more sustainable lifestyle. Welcome, Daniel.
So thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for being here, and happy Earth Day to everybody. I'm really going to address two questions during my talk as best I can. A lot of them are from my own perspective. Taking science into account, it was great to hear the previous speakers. I think they really set a great context for the discussion. So I want to talk about how we got here being rising carbon levels, ocean acidification, a lot of the challenges we're facing, and what can we do about it? And I'm actually going to start out with a poem by Shel Silverstein. The little fish eats the tiny fish. The big fish eats the little fish. So only the biggest fish gets fat. Do you know any folks like that? I think this kind of starts to help us think about maybe how we got to where we are today, to what we're here on Earth Day trying to think about. And I'm going to use that kind of as a segue to talk a little bit more about humans. And so I really appreciate Tierney's talking about the mind and the brain, because a lot of what she said relates to what I'm going to be talking about too. So I'm talking about some great things about the human race. Number one, we're all alive. And we generally want to stay that way. Right? We want to stay that way for the most part. We're smart. That intelligence allows us to do really neat things like innovate. We like to create solutions. We like to explore. We like to try new things. Finally, and this is probably what I think a big motivating force for a lot of what we do, we want to make our lives better. That is a big part of it. We may have different ideas of how to do it, but we want to make our lives better. But we also face a bunch of challenges. This is just one of them. I'll do a couple more. But one of them is pride. I mean, you have to have some pride. Pride's a good thing, but it can easily go too far. And I was thinking about it in this context where we have the illusion that what I think is my big picture can become everybody's big picture. Right? I think stewardship would be the opposite, where the big picture that everybody has, or that I think everybody has, becomes my big picture. So I think we can look at it from both directions, but this is the excessive pride one. And I think we've probably seen a few people who think this way, which is unfortunate. I won't mention any names right now. We have other challenges that we face as individuals. This is 6 of the 7 deadly sins. The other one is on the previous slide. So this, of course, comes from the Christian tradition. I'll mention a couple of them, and you may wonder what some of the words I put on there and why I put them there. Greed, covetousness. Of course, I want more of something. A lot of this is about wanting more of something. Sometimes I want more than I really need, perhaps, because it's nice. I'm thinking that kind of goes with envy. And the reason I put envy and speed, what's speed? What am I talking about, speed? I'm thinking of, that's a really nice car you have. It's got a lot of horsepower. Envy. I want a car like that. I want to be like the Joneses. I want to be like that person who has that neat car. This is part of the consumer addiction cycle that we can get into as humans. It's part of our survival. It's actually wired into us to some extent. We want to do better, and we see that fast car, that nice whatever, as something better. And there's another thing about speed in here, too, that I want to think about in terms of our situation in the environment right now. We like to get to places fast, right? So there's almost an envy, like, I can get here more quickly than you. And so I think about ever since the Industrial Revolution, before we had cars, wow, the idea of making something that could transport us from here to there, without us having to walk or take a horse or something like that, was a great thing. I would have thought it was a great thing, an incredible thing. Little did I know its unintended consequences that we're facing now. Same thing with airplanes. What an incredible thing. I mean, we talked earlier about how many months it took to get from New York to San Francisco. Now it's like how many minutes or hours maybe does it take to get from New York to San Francisco? That's an incredible amount of power that has huge unintended consequences that I would have never thought about back then. So I liken that to one of the deadly sins. And of course, I just took a plane to Chile, so who am I to talk? I'm part of it as well. So I liken that to one of the deadly sins. And of course, I just took a plane to Chile, so who am I to talk? I'm part of it as well. I'm not saying I'm out of this loop, although I do my best to think of these things all the time. Gluttony. It can come down to what we eat. It's not only what we buy, what we use, but what we eat. I love food, I like to eat, and if something's good, I want to eat more of it. Again, that's part of my survival instinct. It's wired into me. So an awareness of this, I think, is of use, and reflection of this trait that we have is of use. Sloth. That's kind of laziness. And convenience is great. I like when things are convenient, but if you take that to the extreme, it's so convenient that I don't really have to work that hard to do it. That's where I call sloth, which is one of the 7 deadly sins. So there's a lot of wisdom, I think, and a lot of thinking about what people have known about for many centuries, the 7 deadly sins, and how they have played out in our human development, and how they play themselves out now in terms of the whole planet, illustrating again how we're all connected. And of course, lust. I don't have to say a whole lot about that right now. But anger, that's part of it too, which isn't exactly one of these. But I relate this, I'm going to push this into Buddhism a little bit. Attachment. The top 5, these 5 here are related to what in Buddhism would be referred to as something related to attachment. I want to have more food. I want to have that plane. I want to have this feeling, the feeling I get when my opinion is validated, like was just mentioned by Tierney. All of these are related to attachment, which is one of the motivating forces which makes us do what we want to do, because we want to get that boost, whatever that happens to be. And when we don't get that, we become angry. So that's where the anger fits in. Again, another one of the 7 deadly sins. So what happens when we don't get what we want? Again, it's something to reflect on. But these are the challenges we face as a human species that I think I'm going to posit that if you put our good qualities together, we want to live and we want things better for ourselves, and you couple them with these flaws that I just talked about on the previous slide, that leads to nearly every challenge that we currently face, including the ones that we've been talking about. Another poem by Shel Silverstein. Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves, then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. I love this poem, and it can actually be taken two ways, as you can imagine. Anything can happen. We've done the amazing things. We've learned to fly. Da Vinci was struggling with that one, and he for centuries, that was just such an incredible thing. We've done the anything. That's amazing. Now, so this can be a double-edged sword. Yes, anything's available. Now let's look at the anything being, how do we get ourselves out? And so this poem, I think, is really powerful. It reflects two sides of the coin when you think about it. And many of the challenges we have now, anything can be. Well, that anything now is, let's work towards a more sustainable world. Now I want to talk about some of the things I do to try to make a difference. These aren't necessarily things that everybody can do, the things that I do. And part of what I want to say is, I enjoy doing them. It's not a chore. It's not like, oh gosh, I have to do this. It's like, oh boy, I get to do this. And that's part of the attitude, I think, that is needed. We don't want sustainability to be a chore, because we're not going to do it. We know that. Look at our brains and how we're wired. Chores, just the word chore is a chore to say. Here's one. This gets me all the time. I am obsessive, and it was hard in Chile because, everything's everything's bottled water and everything. And they say if you're from another country, at first you don't want to drink the water. It's safe, but it really might upset your stomach. Things like that. But around here, I do everything I can. I bring my own, cup. I bring my own plate. Bring my own fork. I don't want to use something I have to throw away. If I have to use it once, what a waste. My gosh, when you think about all the waste that goes into producing these things. And then where do they go? And if you go visit your neighborhood landfill, it's really eye-opening. And straws. They serve you water, and there's a straw in it. I wish I could say, take the straw back and give it to somebody else. I can't, because there's health laws. So anyway, these are just the things I think about a lot. Every time I'm at a restaurant, please no straw. Sometimes they forget, they bring a straw. It's like, okay, I don't want to shame the person, but one of my past hobbies was using waste vegetable oil to power an old Mercedes that ran on diesel. And so I worked the engine. There's a kit. I had to learn how to do all this stuff so that I could run on waste vegetable oil. That was so much fun. I loved it. It was a lot of work, too. But it did work. And one of my landmark achievements was driving my Mercedes with my surfboard on top, tons of air resistance there. I'm sure that killed my mileage, down to LA for a meeting, and then back, completely on vegetable oil. That means I had to bring 35 gallons of vegetable oil with me. But I did it, and it was, I was just sitting there pouring in the parking lot vegetable oil into the spare tank. And I had an extra fuel gauge, so there are 2 fuel tanks associated with this car. It worked well. I think I said I drove around 20,000 miles, all on waste vegetable oil that would have been thrown away or used for some other purpose. And actually, my wife loved this. I had to take that vegetable oil. I got it from old restaurants, and you have to filter it out. You have to filter all the junk out of it. So I had this set up on an old structure that we built for my kids when they used to play. They're older now. And when they stopped playing on it, I used that as a gravity feed for the filter system I set up. So I'd pour vegetable oil into the black container on the top, let it settle, and then I would filter it down into the one on the bottom, and I'd pull it out of there and then put it in my car. So my wife called it the refinery. Did this make a difference? Perhaps. There's actually downsides to running vegetable oil. There's black carbon. There's other things that are extruded. So it's not like a yes, this is the solution for everybody. And there's only so much waste vegetable oil that you can actually use. So did this make a difference? I learned a lot. And I'm telling you now, and maybe inspiring you to do something like this or something else. So it may have made a difference in ways that I wouldn't have anticipated. Now we have an electric car. My wife usually drives that. My choice of vehicle is actually a bicycle, which I'll talk about in a minute. But when I drive, I try to go electric when I can. Or I try to take the bus, which I'll also mention. And we went solar. And it didn't cost me anything. You know, we're using Solar City. They're a big company, you know, which has its pluses and minuses. But for us, it's been a really positive thing. So our house is solarized. I've put insulation on everything. And the electric car we drive gets its electrons from the sun, which is kind of nice, indirectly. I mean, there's a lot of physics in there that I won't go into. But solar is something we can do now. The technology's there. The costs have gone down enough to make it feasible to do it. My much preferred mode of travel is actually bicycle. And we're talking about systems. Tierney was talking about systems a little while ago. When I'm riding my bicycle, I feel like I am part of the system. I am providing the power. I'm conscious of that. And I love the idea of the unicycle. And a bicycle has it too, but with a unicycle, there is so much going on. There's so much balance that it takes to stay on that thing. It's the kind of thing I never thought I could do. And I decided I would learn to do it. In my 40s, I decided I would learn to do it. I never did it as a kid. So I did it, and one of the things I like about the unicycle is there's a balance. You can go forward, you can go backward. And when you get it just right, you got to be just right. You're on that balance there. Then you can actually move on it. So I like the metaphor of the unicycle. Also, I use public transit. I got here today by bus. I got to take the bus to get here today. It's possible to do that. And it becomes exciting. It's like, wow, how am I going to take the bus to get here at this early morning hour, late morning? How can I avoid driving myself and several tons of metal to get where I want to go? It takes a lot of energy to do that. How can we do things differently? I'm not saying everybody can do all the things I'm mentioning, but what I'm saying is we can all be creative about how we live our lives and get excited about putting the puzzle together to make it an interesting thing to do to try to make the world a better place. As was mentioned earlier, collection of water from fog. I actually got the idea. Interestingly enough, there's a TED Talk that I gave 6 years and 1 week ago right here. So you can see it if you go online. You can just search for my name, Fernandez Fog, TEDx. You'll recognize the stage and stuff. It was here. But I talk about how I got into that. And the idea, it came to me at a meditation retreat of all places, where I was thinking about how little water we have and how much fog we have. And wow, can I put the two of those things together? And that's where I got the idea. And that spawned this whole research career that I started 13 or 14 years ago. This is something I just have so much fun with. Solar oven. Has anybody ever baked with a solar oven before? It's so much fun. It's so satisfying when you take hot bread out of the oven or whatever it is you're cooking, and you smell it, and it's like, wow, it actually works. It's like all of our energy, almost pretty much everything except for nuclear, came from the sun. But this is the direct route. You're cutting out the middleman here when you're using a solar oven, and it's really satisfying, and I encourage you to try it sometime. It was mentioned earlier, getting into nature. This is something I also do. It's critical. I think it's critical, and I appreciated what Tierney was talking about, bringing nature into those in solitary confinement. We're talking about mental health here, and there's plenty of studies showing that exposure to nature helps us. It helps us. And when I'm stressed out, I try to get into nature one way or another. I do all the time, whether I'm stressed out or not, and I try not to get stressed out. But going into nature keeps me from crossing that edge. And when I can't always get into nature, this is a garden I planted on the second floor of the science building. Some of those of you who are at CSUMB, who ever visit there, will see all the plants that are there. And this is 3 years ago. They're still going, of avocado trees and all that. And I even had baby dinosaurs in there. Connecting with others. That's a critical part of what we're doing. We are not solitary species. We live in community. And being able to connect with others, whether we agree with them or not, and working towards how do we move forward together in the challenges we have. And of course, meditating. That's still a critical part of my mental health. And I'll read this quote for you, which helps for me with the idea of meditation. Without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. So reflection, having that time to reflect, however you do it, where you're not busy, where you're not just looking online, it makes a big difference. Sometimes while walking in nature and reflecting, wow, you can do a few things at once. It's really powerful. I want to close with a poem by Mary Oliver called Wild Geese that some of you may have heard, but I think it's very fitting for Earth Day. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes. Over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Thank you.